Hey, what's up, guys? This is D, and you're watching the Rear Naked Podcast. I want to thank you guys that have subscribed to the channel and have been supporting us so far. If you haven't, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below on the YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Rear Naked Podcast. We're going to jump right into things today because we got a lot to talk about with Saturday's International Fight Week, UFC 239 in Vegas. And before we get into that, I want to touch on a couple of things from last week's cards. Got Joseph Benavidez defeating Formiga and asking for a fight with Henry Cejudo next. So it would be interesting to see whether or not Henry Cejudo comes and takes that fight on. And then Francis Ngannou defeating Junior Dos Santos in the first round and asking to be the next in line for whoever wins the DC and Stipe fight. So be interesting to see, especially if DC does beat Stipe again. I think it'd be awesome to see a Francis Ngannou versus Daniel Cormier fight. Other than that, we got Max Holloway taking on Frankie Edgar July 27th for the featherweight title. And it's going to be dope to see Max back down at featherweight. Hasn't been super healthy the last time that he fought at featherweight, and then had a little bit of issues trailing into his fights at lightweight. But he did do a spectacular job in most of those fights and only lost that last fight so far. So I'm looking to see him bounce back, man. Max is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. So I think he'll continue to hold that title in the featherweight division. And then we'll see what happens. We'll see if he comes back up to lightweight and wants to play around there, because I think it's a lot more fun to see Max fight at lightweight. And I think regardless of what happened with his last fight with Dustin, that he still could stand and bang with pretty much 9 out of 10 of the top 10 guys in the lightweight division. So really looking forward to see that coming up in July. Other than that, man, we'll jump right into this Saturday, UFC 239. Like I said, it's International Fight Week, July 7th in Vegas. And where to even start with that fight, man? There's so many fights on that card. The undercard already has a ton of great fights. Gilbert Melendez making his return, and then we got Randa Marcos taking on Claudia Gadelha. So really looking forward to see that. Marlon Vera. There's a bunch of really good fights on the prelims and the early prelims. Kicking things off in the main card, we got Thiago Sanchez taking on Michael Chiesa at welterweight. So that's going to be a fucking great fight. Both of those guys are a hell of a striker. And, really tough dudes, so I'd expect that to be a real violent fight and probably one of the fight of the night bonuses. Then we got Luke Rockhold making his return against Jan Blachowicz, and that could go either way. Both of those guys are super tough and really creative strikers as well. So as far as the light heavyweight division, both of those guys are on their way back up. Luke Rockhold's a really great striker, but he's had some injuries as of late and had to deal with that, so it'll be interesting to see how he comes back in this bout against Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz really been smashing people lately, so could go either way. Like I said, man, I'm probably going to go with Blachowicz on that one. Then we got Jorge Masvidal taking on Ben Askren, and Askren's second UFC fight. And with the way that Askren's first fight went, really interesting to see what's going to happen with this fight, because Jorge Masvidal is just as good of a striker, if not better, than Robbie Lawler. And he's also got some great wrestling background, too. So they're definitely not doing Ben Askren any favors, so it's going to be a hell of a tough fight for him. I don't see him being able to beat Jorge Masvidal unless he does something crazy right off the bat, because Robbie was busting him up in this first match. And, if it wouldn't have went the way that it did, I think we probably would have seen Askren get his ass whooped in the next round in that fight. So after that, we got Amanda Nunes taking on Holly Holm in the women's bantamweight title, and I'm super stoked to see this fight, man. Holly Holm is an amazing striker, and Amanda Nunes as tough as they come. So this is going to be one of those fights, probably fight of the night right here, man. And somebody's probably going to sleep in this fight. I can almost guarantee that. So can't wait to see that fight. After that, we got John Jones taking on Thiago Santos in the main event for the men's light heavyweight title, and I can't wait to see this fight. I think Jones is still going to figure out a way to beat Thiago Santos, but it's going to be one of his toughest fights, if not his toughest fight to date. But that's one of Jones's greatest attributes, just his ability to adapt almost immediately in the first round of any fight against any opponent, and figure out a way inside of their head and how to physically dominate them, whether it's with something tricky or it's with just some basic striking defenses and whatnot. Either way, the way that he implements them is so disciplined and so well practiced and just effortless that it's one of the reasons that John Jones is one of my favorite fucking fighters in the UFC. So yeah, there's a lot of good fights to look forward to Saturday night. International Fight Week, really packed card. A lot of fights that we didn't have time to mention, but like I said, the early prelim cards, those are packed with a lot of talented fighters too. So you're not going to want to miss a single fight on this card Saturday. With that being said, we're going to jump over to a couple of fan questions, and then we'll take a look at the fight picks. First question comes from Blake in Iowa City, and Blake wanted to know who I thought Conor would fight in his return and win. I don't know. That could go either way, man. The way that the UFC is, and especially with Conor, honestly, they could set up anything. They could have Conor fighting some celebrity next week. So I don't know. If they don't do something crazy like that, I think it's one of two fights, and I think the most likely is probably Conor versus Khabib, maybe in September in that Abu Dhabi fight. And that might have already been negotiated. Who knows? If not, then Kavanaugh's been talking a lot about how he'd like to see Conor come back and do the Diaz trilogy. And everybody that watches this show knows that I would love to see that fight. Not that we necessarily need to, because as Nate has stated plenty of times before, and I agree with him, he's already whooped Conor's ass twice, and he's kind of he seems to be over the fight, but I'm sure he'd take the fight for the right amount of money if they're not trying to fuck him on it. So, yeah, man, I would love to see Nate whoop Conor's ass, but I think the most likely is probably going to be Khabib versus Conor in September in Abu Dhabi, because that'll be the money fight for them. Next question comes from Tony in Colorado Springs. He asked, does Askren make it past Masvidal? I don't know, man. We'll find out. That's really all I can say, because like I've said a couple of times before with Askren's debut against Robbie Lawler, Lawler was touching him up, man, and Lawler busted his face up pretty good. And had it not ended the way that it did, I think we would have seen Lawler probably finish him with a TKO, if not a knockout. So we'll see, man. Askren's still a tough dude, a great wrestler, but I'm not a big fan of the dude. So I would love to see Jorge Masvidal completely dominate him Saturday night, but we'll see what happens, man. We'll see if Askren doesn't come out with something tricky right away and take control. I think that's probably what we're likely to see happen, man, is Jorge's a great striker, and he's got that strong wrestling background. So we'll see, man. We'll see. Jorge comes to fight. So yeah, Askren better show up. That being said, we'll go ahead and take a look at the fight picks this week. So kicking things off in the women's bantamweight division, we got Julia Avila taking on Pani Kianzad, and we're going to go with Avila in that fight. Then in the men's welterweight division, we got Ismail Nardev taking on Chance Rencounter, and we're going to go with Rencounter there. Then in the middleweight division, we've got Edmund Shabazian taking on Jack Marshman. We're going to go with Shabazian there. And kicking things off, the men's bantamweight division, we've got Alejandro Perez taking on Song Yadong, and that could go either way, man, but probably going to be Song Yadong coming away with the win there. Then we got Claudia Gadella taking on Randa Marcos in the women's strawweight division. We got Marcos in that fight. In the men's bantamweight division, we got Marlon Vera taking on Noelin Hernandez, and probably going to go with Marlon Vera on that fight. Then in the featherweight division, we got Gilbert Melendez taking on Arnold Allen, and we got Melendez there. Then kicking things off for the main card, we got Diego Sanchez taking on Michael Chiesa at welterweight, and this could go either way, but we're going to go ahead and pick Chiesa here. Then in the men's light heavyweight division, we got Luke Rockhold making his return against Jan Blachowicz, and we got Blachowicz in that fight. Then in the men's welterweight division, we got Jorge Masvidal taking on Ben Askren. And like I said, this is going to be a dope fight, man. I think Masvidal's probably going to win this one, but it's going to be interesting to see if Askren's learned anything since his fight with Robbie Lawler, how to not get in there and get his face busted up. So, if he can avoid that, he's got a decent chance, but we're going to go with Masvidal for that fight. In the co-main event, in the women's bantamweight title, we got Amanda Nunes taking on Holm. I'm going to go with Holm in this one. I'm a big fan of Nunes and have been, but I've been a fan of Holly's for a lot longer, and she's just a different striker, somebody that we haven't necessarily seen Amanda have to face yet. So regardless of Amanda's pressure, she's still going to have to deal with the fact that Holm can keep her at distance better than a lot of the fighters that she's been fighting lately. So, we got Holm in that fight. And then moving up to the main event, the men's light heavyweight title, got John Jones taking on Thiago Santos. We got John Jones for that one. It could go either way, and Santos is definitely the guy out of a lot of these dudes that could come in and put John to sleep easily with one or two punches. But I don't see that happening. Like I mentioned, man, one of John's greatest attributes is his ability to adapt almost immediately against any opponent and figure out what their game plan is and figure out a way to get around it. So we got John Jones in that fight. Definitely a lot of crazy fights this week, man. So make sure you guys get your fight pick submissions in. We do take submissions every week up until an hour before fight cards start. So you can submit them via Facebook Messenger at the Rear Naked Podcast or to rearnakedpodcast@gmail.com. And anybody picks a perfect fight card, we'll send you a free Rear Naked Podcast t-shirt. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for the show this week. I want to thank you guys for continuing to tune in and support the channel. If you haven't, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below on the YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Rear Naked Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.